it's not about that either. It's not about, no, Mike, it's not. It is about, it is about fundamental evolutionary motivations. All right?
Which are driven by...
No, they are not. They are, in fact...
Perceptions of benefit.
No, they are not. They are not. In fact...
what are they driven by?
In fact, they are driven by survival. Okay? So, in fact, the organism's pursuit of resources is driven by, ultimately, their desire to have children. Okay? And not the other way around.
But that doesn't tell me how many. It doesn't tell me why.
You have as many as they feasibly can support. Mike, it has to do with as many as they can feasibly support. So they aren't having as many children. They aren't having a lot of children to maximize the output of the farm. They are trying to get as much out of the farm to have as many children as they can. And they can't have more. And the reason they can't have more, it's a subsistence society, and frequently their kids would die, okay?
But there's a circular relationship between all of these factors. The survival, the number of children, this is the feedback loop that feeds back on itself. That's why it's silly to say that one
that doesn't mean that, well, no, it's not,
that's not how
because
you think about it in economics.
It's not relevant at this point, all right? Yes, it's an equilibrium, but if you want to understand the motivation of the participants, okay, that's where you have to consider ultimately that they aren't the whole system, right? What is limiting the maximum, please stop for a second. What is limiting the maximum number of children is the environment, not the farmers, okay? They would have more children if they could.
Okay. But ironically, that's the point that I was making earlier, that like the factors are much more complex, and I agree with that. But clearly that there is something different. We're still biologically quite similar, but we've undergone economic changes, but also sociological changes.
Screenshots. 10K followers, my ass.
Preferences
The
are
love
different.
intro theme song.
Even though our society could, in theory,
We're crushing it on our YouTube.
way more children, if that's what people's preferences were.
You're making my dreams come true, Sean.
I don't think it could.
Why community hers come true? Why won't you put it on the song? What do you say?
Why? What was the limiting factor? But in the past, I mean, people would, kids would go out on their own.
No, they wouldn't. No.
Just all depends. I mean, you can't generalize all of human history. It's like to say in human history people couldn't
No, stop,
hunt.
Mike, stop,
That's
stop
like
this.
stupid.
No,
That's
stop,
the dumbest
stop,
thing
stop.
ever.
No, you're being stupid. You're doing
that
the
is a
dumbest thing
stupid
ever.
generalization.
No, you are being
to say
stupid.
that
Okay,
through all
stop being
history, no one
stupid.
could
Stop
hunt.
being stupid. Stop being stupid. How do you like that kind of argument, Mike? That's not an argument. All right, calling shit stupid. Calling shit stupid is not an argument.
In
okay.
history, people couldn't hunt. That was what you claimed.
No, I did not say that. I said in the Middle Ages they couldn't hunt.
In Middle Ages, well, my understanding is that you could hunt in the Middle Ages.
No, it was frequently illegal.
But in other places it wasn't.
Yes, but in other places it was illegal. Okay, so the assumption that they could hunt, or they could do this, or they could do that, is not a reasonable assumption. Okay?
My reading of history is that the children were always finding little animals, hunting little animals, and trading them in for money.
Productivity, well, no, they're not trading them in for money. Okay, nobody would have money in most parts of medieval Europe. Coinage was very rare, okay? But they might have eaten them, okay? But
they
this
had
version...
silver coins.
No, they did not, okay? People rarely had coins at all.
How did they trade then?
They would trade raw goods, okay? Or they would go to market and be issued scrip. And the scrip was so that they didn't have to carry money.
And one of the things they could trade for would be, well, trapped animals and other things
like that. Your children are not coming with you to the market in general, all right? And in fact, most peasants did not go to the market. They brought their goods to some central location, and then those goods were further on brought and on to the market. Okay, and at the market, trading was done in scrip.
Great, but people ate meat.
Okay, so
people ate some meat.
People did not eat very much meat in the Middle Ages, and it was frequently like a handful of times a year, and they would buy it. All right, they would purchase it, and hunting was heavily restricted. And if you look at the forest laws, it's a great example of this kind of restriction. It was a whole system of laws and dedicated courts to prevent people from hunting in the king's realm or whatever. Okay, it was not the case that children were going around catching small animals and trading them for money in the Middle Ages. I'm not saying it never happened, but I'm saying this was not like a major activity.
Well, fine.
Maybe they would eat them. Okay, they could eat squirrels. They could eat squirrels. Okay, sure.
So it's just like the simple farm food productivity of that next child is just not the complete picture of the motivating and what's creating that equilibrium.
But it's very important to understand that it was not a net productivity. Many people have argued that it is. That, in the Middle Ages, people had more children because they helped on the farm. Well, actually, it cost them something, even when the kids help on the farm, because they don't help that much.
But there could be basically threshold effects where you need to be, there's a minimum threshold. If you can reach that certain threshold, then you're in like the highly profitable, basically comfortable zone. And then if you go exceed it, then basically the benefits taper off,
No, what I'm saying is it's a loss. So there's not a threshold where it's profitable.
Well, there is an equilibrium. I mean, what is driving the equilibrium?
But that's separate from the idea that people had more children because they helped on the farm. Well, that would make sense if there were a net benefit to it.
But there is.
But it turns out there is not a net benefit to it.
So a couple gets married, and they start out have 0 children. There is a couple in the Middle Ages. So they decide that they have their first child, and then they're going to make a decision to the second child. But eventually they'll make a decision that's like, okay, this is enough children. And the prior to that, they'll make the decision this is not enough children. Okay? So something is driving their preferences. Something about their understanding of the world and life is driving the preferences that make them know what is the right amount of children.
But that is not relevant to the idea that the children are profitable. They are not.
Well, I mean, it's just
it could simply be the case that they have as many children as they think they can feed.
But let's say beneficial, not just profitable, but beneficial.
But they're not. Overall. But that's not when people are talking about. When people are saying,
doesn't that prove Mike's point about the fact that it's not always about economics when having kids?
That's what we were arguing earlier.
No, because I'm saying they have as many kids as they can have, as they economically can have.
Right, but in theory, it was harder to economically raise kids back then, right? But they still had more kids than they have now. So doesn't that prove Mike's point that it's not all about economics? It's more complicated than that?
No, because you've got to ask what are the limiting resources, right? And so if the limiting resource is food, and that's the only one, then, or when the limiting resource is food, then they stop when they run out of food, basically. But there are other resources that are limited. And
So if
just that
having kids was such a big liability back then, but they still had kids, a lot of kids, then why did they have more kids?
They had enough time. Well, it's just that they had enough resources all in to have those kids. They had enough food and they had enough time. And our problem is that we don't have enough time. Not that we don't have enough food. We have plenty of food, but we don't have enough time.
And that's because of income.
theory.
That's because of income inequality. Yes.
No, it's not because of income inequality. It's because of development. Okay, the way that we have to train to work is very intensive, and we can't timeshare that with raising children. That was not true in the Middle Ages. Women did the most work of their lives between 15 and 30 in the Middle Ages, but that's also when they raised children. The way that they worked, though, was compatible with having children.
But as the amount of time people spend per week working goes down, the birth rate is also going down.
The
So
amount
it's
of time
just
people,
not that simple. I mean, it's about their actual preferences.
The amount of time people spend per week working is, I don't know if maybe there's a threshold there, and it's not really important until it's very low, or until like a certain number of days is free or whatever. But your children need time and attention every single day. If, for example, consider that you need to sleep for 8 hours, okay? So that means you have 16 hours left. Well, if you go from working, an 8-hour day to a 7-hour day, you have 1 more hour for your kid, I guess. That isn't necessarily enough to make a difference.
But
there's a driver from a small town in Illinois who walked away with $80,000 after their car accident.
For example, like Orthodox Jews
And other
they live in the same society as the rest of us. Similar economic conditions, yet they have a lot more children. So why? One theory is just as simple as they just value it more. It's part of their identity that they value more children. So you can't, when you're talking about psychology,
Mike,
you have to factor in identity.
Mike, that's just one theory. But what makes you value? But what are the other theories, and how are you evaluating?
Well, so it's just what causes people to value things in certain ways.
I'm
Economics
asking you,
could cause people to value things.
I'm asking you, what are some
could cause
alternate
people to
explanations? What are some alternate explanations for this behavior among ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities?
I mean, well, as opposed to just generalizing it's part of their identity to have large families, and other people in the group have large families. It's something that they find desirable.
But what are some other theories besides that? You've only presented one theory.
I mean, you could maybe they don't use birth control. Maybe they are richer. Maybe they are poorer. I mean, these are just alternative theories.
Okay, that's so.
Because I know.
But Mike, aren't these communities where many people don't speak English?
No, I mean, I know a lot of American
those
Jewish
communities
families that are big families.
Those communities definitely exist. Those communities definitely exist among the ultra-Orthodox. All right, and I would say in general, what you're seeing there is people who have not confronted the full effects of development. All right, because there is no community. There is no demographic that when they undergo development, don't undergo demographic.
It's like my Chabad rabbi's got 5 kids.
Yeah, that's an anecdote. That is literally an anecdote. But Mike, that is an anecdote. Mike, all your Chabad rabbis are an anecdote.
Well, but
So what? Like, can you, for example, tell me what the TFR is of this community?
But I can tell why these people
You believe you
have
can.
more children.
You believe you can, but this is all stuff you can cite for me that I can never see. All right.
Well,
Now
okay.
you're talking about things that are not evidence. Okay, that you cannot even put in evidence.
It seems that it's their identity that is.
But again, Mike, you're just
preferences.
telling me stuff that I can never see.
You've never seen religion.
You can't show me your rabbi's family. Okay, I don't know your rabbi.
But you've never met like.
I've never met your rabbis. No, so you're telling me stuff that you cannot put in evidence.
Do you ever go to, Shoal or anything?
Mike, I'm not Jewish.
You're not?
No, what the fuck? How many times have I had to tell people I'm not Jewish? No, I am not a Jew.
No, I didn't realize it.
Can I jump in here? This might be a little confusing because it's another mic. So, I can only imagine or guess at what TFR was, but I typed it in. And I typed in Roman Catholic USA, and there's plenty of data on the fact that being a Roman Catholic increases the number of children you have. So, the total birth rate for people who are not religious at all in 2020 in the U.S. is below 1.5. For Roman Catholics in the same period, it's almost 2.25. And those are people who go to service weekly. People who go to service less than weekly, but are still Roman Catholic, are still just under replacement. They're at like 1.8 as opposed to people who are not religious. As I said, being down at about 1.3. So I mean, there is.
So, in my opinion, you're much more likely to raise the birth rate by encouraging people to practice organized religion than fooling with the economy. Because it's a much more realistic way to drive people's preferences about what kind of family they have, as opposed to, their economic realities. It's like
the other thing
one is
I'll
more
point
of a causal
Mike?
factor than.
Sorry, Mike, jump in. Throw out some other things that Jason was saying was, like Roman Catholics in the U.S. I mean, obviously there are popular amongst Latinos, but it's not exclusive. It's winner, and they're not super rich, they're not super poor. They're basically the definition of middle class. Electricians, things like.
Family.
Okay, but so hold on. I want you to, Mike, to go look at the TFR in the U.S. in 1800, and then tell me what you think about the Catholics today.
If you're talking about a fucking trend over that period of time,
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at, though, is that is what. Yeah, hugely, massively. They have fallen massively. If the issue were whether you were Catholic or not, well, the Catholics should still be at like 8 or something, but they're not.
Well, they're above replacement, which.
Yes, but they're not at 8. Okay, TFR was much higher than above replacement in the past.
But they could just be susceptible to the litany of other factors, whether they're economic, psychological,
Indeed, and
math,
that's
psychological, and all kinds.
Yes, and that is the factor that I am trying to explain because that is such a powerful factor.
Well, look at the Israeli birth rate.
Well, it either is or it isn't. It could just be a random correlation.
So, Dolan, the Israeli birth rate is a little above replacement.
I thought it was at 3.
But not among educated Israelis. Okay, you have to factor out people who aren't developed, basically, when you do these things, if you're looking at populations like that.
Okay, well,
so
basically, so the Israeli birth rate is what? 2? Around 2?
2.4 or something among educated people. Among normal people, okay, who participate in a normal industrial economy, right? Not just like PhDs. I mean, among people who are normal.
Okay, so why do we think that is?
Nobody knows. Okay, it's a great question. It's something I want to know. I visit Israel in part to see like this weird. It's a very weird society in many ways, and so I go to.
Well, I can give you the answer.
Nobody knows the answer, but go ahead.
Well, the reason the Jewish people are so powerful is because they value education, religion, and family more than anything else.
This is not why they are so powerful, okay? They are so powerful because of their octopus temple in Khazaria, okay, which allows them to see through the whole earth. It is a big tunnel through the earth, and they can see both sides of the earth at the same time. And that's why they are so powerful, okay? So don't try to fool me.
Well, nobody knows the extent of the genetic basis of intelligence. This is something that's hotly debated, but it's too hard to experimentally, tease apart nature versus nurture on intelligence because, once again, highly complex system, lots of feedback loops. You can't take two twins and raise them drastically differently.
You can, in fact, see a strong correlation between people's parents' intelligence and their intelligence, okay? Even when they're separated from their parents.
Right. So,
and what that suggests is intelligence is about 50% heritable, okay? Which is highly heritable.
It's at least partially heritable.
Yes. And Ashkenazi Jews have higher intelligence than other races, almost all other races. Maybe East Asians are close, okay? But other races are less intelligent than Ashkenazi Jews.
What about
on average?
If you feel like you're part of a community and you have strong relationships? I mean, that may be one of the reasons during the feudal days, like, they're forced to have a community, right? Where you have a close-knit community. Maybe you're more likely to have kids. I don't know.
I think these are all potentially contribute, but I don't think you can have a close-knit community if you're never in your house.
But it could be just some kind of adverse selection from the distant past, where these traits were selected for this group, and like other traits were selected in other groups.
Jason,
just because of the circumstance.
I'm not going to speculate too much on the Jews. Okay.
Yeah. What's the conceit of your argument, Jason?
My argument?
Yeah, I'm confused. Are we talking about birth rates or Jews, or what are we talking about?
Birth rates. What I'm saying is, we gotta go back to the future to get a handle on birth rates. In the ancient times, women worked hard. They worked hard in the economy, but they worked hard in the economy in a context where their kids could be around. So we have to come up with some plan for women to keep working hard, but in a way that they can have kids around and raise kids at the same time, just like in the ancient world. So that means like laser cutters, it means safe textile machines, it means, 3D printers and all that kind of stuff. Because kids can be around those. They won't get killed by them, okay?
So I'm just to play devil's advocate, I'm not
Go ahead,
trying to get under your skin or anything, but so do you ever, we all, like most people generally on here, talk a lot about evolutionary biology, like evolutionary psychology, all this type of stuff. Do you ever think about how, and I hate to sound like postmodernist here, but do you ever think about how different things conferred, the same traits conferred, in particular in humans, a social evolutionary advantage to certain people, and those things just fell out of fashion, right? Like technology takes those things off the table. So, for instance, and I mean this is hypothetical, but so a certain amount of people, not just alcoholics, like within alcoholics, a certain amount of people get exhilarated. They actually find alcohol to be a stimulant, and gives them energy. And when you lived in a society where you didn't have potable water and everyone was at least halfway drunk all day, you could see all the people who would be fucking sleepy and stunad, as they say, from drinking would kind of be out when it was mandatory. When there was like a three drink mandatory, like every 2 hours. The guy who got sharp, because if I fell off the wagon and had a couple drinks, I could park my car in your back pocket. Like I get sharp, So that was an evolutionary advantage for a very, very, very long time, or at least plausibly was, and it just fell out of fashion, right? Society advanced beyond that, and so to pick a trait and to patently say this is the best survival strategy. This trait was selected for this because it confers, forever enduring survival benefits. I don't think is necessarily true. I think it's probably got to be demonstrated, and so it makes sense on its face that people who have more kids will, at least in evolutionary terms, beat out people who have less kids. But nevertheless, that's an assumption. And when whatever the priors change, when the inputs change or whatever, that too could change, right? So long as they don't have no children.
So, yeah, that's like, there is like a balance between number of children and investment in each child. And as infant mortality goes down and maternal mortality goes down, well, actually, as child mortality goes down, the benefits of investment in each child goes up. Right? As maternal mortality goes down, then you could theoretically have more children rather than less. But for some reason, it doesn't happen. But I think there's a solution in all this, which we can get into later.
Well,
I was trying to radical idea.
I was trying to drill down on why you think it's a problem, though you acknowledge that.
Why do I think it's a problem to have fewer children? Period.
Yeah, it sounded like you at least, hypothetically agreed with what I pointed out, that like basically questioning the assumption of like, well, why is having larger families, so long as you're at or around replacement, why is it just a priori better to have more or vastly more than replacement?
It's not better. Actually, replacement is really the goal, right? But to get to replacement, some people have to have 3 or 4 children or 5. So the social tolerance has to be higher than like 2 kids, because 2 is not replacement, right? 2 is below replacement. So it's a hair below, but it's below. So we do have to think about how does a woman who grows up wanting to be an astronaut or something have a satisfying career and have 4 children before she's 30 years old. I think we do have to think that through, and have a good answer for that question.
But it's not like it's impossible. I mean, if women want to do that, they're able to. It's just that most people don't care to do that anymore. And they have a lot of other alternatives. It's like, instead of just having kids and raising their family, they have a million other choices, lifestyle choices they can do.
I don't think that's true. I don't think it's possible to have, for most people, for most careers, to have 4 children and that career before 30, because the intensity of training required for being a lawyer or being, take your pick, chemical engineer, or many other careers that we have is too great.
Yeah, this just kind of seems too, I don't know, multivariable, right? Like, because, I was just questioning, like, the basic assumption of, like, more kids equals better, unequivocally. And now you're bringing into the mix, the economic needs of the family. And are you bringing this up just because it seems like it's been demonstrated, at least in America and the West, that these are the choices people are making to put off for that thing? Because I mean, there are plenty of people who have plenty of kids who are not like lawyers and things like.
Right, but they will have, in many cases, some other career, which it can be intensive. Okay, it could be a I don't know, adhesive materials technician or a nurse practitioner. That's a very intense career, actually. To many families of medical professional, women frequently go into that. Why do we need women to have intense careers between 15 and 30? Well, it is because those are their most productive years economically. And now we imagine a battle to the death between societies, right? We have to go back to Darwin. Darwin teaches us that life is a battle to the death. And so one society makes use of those years, and one society does not. Then those societies have war. Which society has more?
And the president's return to work. That's it. End of story. You know. So.
I think the first 2 weeks has been pretty massive.
Yes.
And if it continues at that rate, I mean, even if you think about one of the big economic questions right now is the 10-year treasury rates, right? They're going up. Bond markets don't like our national debt. If this is the pace of what cutting looks like presented in a coherent plan, I'm hopeful that bond investors and credit investors in the U.S. government debt can at least say, okay, this is positive progress, which actually will bring down not only the costs that you're cutting directly, but also our interest rate costs.
Yes.
And I think that's really when we hit a virtuous cycle here, which I think could happen soon.
No, I agree. Actually, the bond markets do not currently reflect the savings that I'm confident we can achieve. And I'm giving a talk later this week with J.P. Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon, and that'll be obviously a financial audience, and really to say, look, if you're shorting bonds, I think you're on the wrong side of the bet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically
seriously.
Yeah. It's like really like basically the bond. I mean, there will be less debt needed as we stop wasting taxpayer money on crazy things like whatever the $15 million for condoms to Gaza, which I suspect didn't actually end up being condoms in Gaza. That's a lot of condoms, guys. What is it, a super tanker of condoms? I mean, how many do you need?
Oh my gosh, you guys.
That's a real line item. That's not a
well,
is this fiction?
I don't doubt that that we did have those items going to Gaza. I don't know if it was that many, but this
that was the line item. It was $50 million.
This is the problem.
Yeah.
Well, it was probably that line item, but God knows.
Yeah, what
it
was it really?
Right,
yes,
exactly. But that's the problem we have with the budget, and why when monies flow through all of these entities, we may have a line item that goes to, say, USAID and